I was 6 years old the first time I took communion. I had no idea what it was about. I thought they were serving snacks, and I chose a cracker that was shaped like a gun. My mom realized that I wasn't ready to participate in communion, and so it was several years before she let me do it again. When I was 16, I was baptized in water by the pastor in a swimming pool. And although I was serious about my baptism, I was embarrassed by the attention. And after I got out of the water, I tried to push a friend into the pool. Yeah, it was inappropriate. I've matured since then. Most of you have been to a church service where baptism or communion took place, and maybe you wondered what it was all about. The sixth fundamental truth affirms our belief that water baptism and communion are the two ordinances of the church. Some churches consider additional services as ordinances, such as foot washing, last rites, or marriage, but the Assemblies of God recognizes only the two. The word ordinance means to order or command. Jesus said, "Do this." But we don't apply the word to everything that Jesus commanded, only to certain special commands. An ordinance is a special worship ceremony that illustrates the gospel message, the death of Jesus, our salvation, and our inclusion into the church. These ceremonies require the worshiper to physically and prophetically act out their surrender to Jesus. And Jesus promises to respond by imparting grace to the worshiper. Most of the theological debate focuses on the last part of that definition, how these services impart grace. Well, we believe that the act itself does not impart grace. It is the faith of the participant that receives the grace. The first ordinance is water baptism. The word baptism means to dip, and our church practices total immersion baptism rather than sprinkling. Christian baptism has its roots in Jewish baptism. The Jews practice many different types of ceremonial washing. They wash their hands before meals, they wash their implements in the temple, they washed their clothes before they went to worship, and they baptized worshipers too. These baptisms were a symbol of spiritual cleansing, of dedication, and spiritual renewal. Some Jewish groups looked at baptism as an initiation ceremony. It was a rite of membership into a religious community. Well, Christian baptism adopted all of these meanings, with another unique idea being added. Baptism illustrates the death and resurrection of Jesus, and illustrates the death of our old self and the new life that Jesus brings to us. The second ordinance is communion. The two elements of communion are the bread and the cup. The bread signifies Christ's body, and the cup signifies Christ's blood. The theological significance of communion is very similar to baptism. It's about the sacrifice of Christ and the new life that Christ brings to us. And since communion is always done as a group, it celebrates our inclusion into the new community. I've just explained these things briefly, and there are lots more things that we could say about these things. There are thousands of books that are written about the ordinances of the church. But here's a question. My first two experiences with baptism and communion were less than mature. Was my mother correct in making me wait? Should my pastor have made me wait until I was more mature? How much faith and understanding is required to participate in these things? Must we be advanced and mature before we engage in these ordinances? Here's the thing. Jesus commands us to observe these ordinances regularly and to incorporate them into our routine worship service because they demonstrate and reenact the essential gospel message in a way that is simple for the new believer and at the same time is profound for the mature believer. Jesus knew that people will tend to drift away from their original salvation experience and from the essential gospel message. Jesus commands us to celebrate these ordinances regularly to help ensure that we will never drift away from this basic message and this basic experience. So whether you are new in the faith or a seasoned saint, these two worship practices will help increase your faith and strengthen your walk in the Lord.